If you stand on the coast of Sicily and look out at the sea, you quickly understand something important. Sicily was never meant to belong to just one people. It sits right in the middle of the Mediterranean, closer to Africa than to Northern Europe, closer to Greece than to France, and directly on the sea routes that ancient sailors, traders, and armies used for thousands of years. Because of this, Sicily was never isolated. It was visited, settled, ruled, fought over, and reshaped again and again. When people say Sicily is one of the most mixed places in Europe, they are not exaggerating. They are describing a place where history did not pass by quietly. It arrived loudly, stayed for centuries, and left traces that are still visible today. Sicily's DNA, in the broad human sense, is a record of that movement. In this video, we're uncovering how centuries of movement and coexistence turned Sicily into one of the most layered places in Europe. If you enjoy calm, story-driven history that actually explains why places feel the way they do, like the video and subscribe. It helps these stories reach more people. Now let's begin. To understand Sicily, you cannot start in modern Italy. You have to go much further back. Long before Rome became an empire, Sicily was already attracting outsiders. The earliest inhabitants of the island were prehistoric peoples who lived there thousands of years before written history. But Sicily's real transformation began when seafaring civilization started to dominate the Mediterranean. Around the 8th century BCE, Greek settlers began arriving in large numbers. They did not come as visitors. They came to build cities. Syracuse, Agrigento, Selinunte, and many other Sicilian cities were Greek foundations. This period became known as Magna Graecia, meaning Greater Greece, because southern Italy and Sicily were so heavily influenced by Greek culture that they felt like an extension of the Greek world. The Greeks brought language, religion, architecture, farming techniques, and city planning. Temples rose across the island, some of which still stand today. Greek became the dominant language in many areas. For centuries, Sicily was culturally Greek, not Italian in the modern sense. This matters because when people talk about Sicily's mixed background, Greece is not a minor footnote. It is one of the island's deepest layers. Rome did not erase Greek Sicily overnight. Instead, it absorbed it. Sicily became Rome's first province, a critical source of grain that fed the empire. Roman roads, villas, laws, and administration spread across the island. Latin entered daily life, though Greek continued to be spoken in many areas for generations. Roman rule connected Sicily more tightly to the rest of the Italian peninsula, but it did not make Sicily culturally uniform. Even under Rome, the island remained a crossroads. Slaves, soldiers, merchants, and officials arrived from different parts of the empire, from North Africa, the Eastern Mediterranean, and beyond. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed, Sicily did not settle into peace. Instead, it entered another long phase of transition. After Rome, Germanic groups such as the Vandals briefly controlled the island, followed by the Byzantine Empire. Under Byzantine rule, Sicily leaned eastward again. Greek language and Orthodox Christianity regained strength. The island was tied more closely to Constantinople than to Rome. Then came one of the most defining periods in Sicilian history, the Arab era, a chapter that reshaped the island in ways that are still visible today, even if many people don't immediately recognize where those influences came from. In the 9th century, Muslim forces from North Africa began their conquest of Sicily. This was not a brief raid or a short-lived occupation. Arab rule lasted for more than 200 years, long enough to change how the island worked, how people lived, and how Sicily connected to the wider world. During this time, Sicily was not a forgotten frontier. It became one of the most advanced, organized, and prosperous regions in Europe. Under Arab rule, Sicily experienced a quiet revolution in daily life. One of the most important changes happened in agriculture. The Arabs introduced sophisticated irrigation systems that allowed water to be controlled and distributed efficiently across dry land. This transformed farming completely. Fields that had once depended on rain alone could now support intensive cultivation. New crops arrived and took root. Citrus fruits like lemons and oranges became part of the landscape. Sugarcane, rice, almonds, pistachios, and new vegetables spread across the island. These were not small additions. They changed diets, trade, and the rural economy. Even today, many foods people associate with Sicilian cuisine trace their origins back to this period. Cities also changed. Palermo, under Arab rule, became one of the largest and most vibrant cities in Europe at the time. Markets expanded, crafts flourished, and Sicily became deeply connected to trade routes linking Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Knowledge flowed in alongside goods. Advances in mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and engineering reached the island through the Islamic world. Language absorbed this influence naturally. Arabic words entered everyday speech, especially for farming, food, and place names. Many towns, neighborhoods, and geographical features still carry names rooted in Arabic, even if modern speakers are unaware of their origin. Architecture changed as well. Homes, courtyards, water features, and urban layouts reflected North African and Middle Eastern styles adapted to Sicilian life. These elements did not disappear when Arab rule ended. They blended into what came after. Most importantly, this era left a mark on the people themselves. Arabs did not live apart from the local population for 2 centuries. They lived among them. They worked, traded, formed families, and built communities. Over generations, intermarriage was natural and unavoidable. Sicily did not simply host Arab rulers, it absorbed them. And when the next conquerors arrived, they inherited an island that had already been profoundly changed, not erased, but layered, ready for the next chapter in its long, complex story. Then came the Normans, and with them, one of the most unusual chapters in Sicily's long history. The Normans were not Mediterranean people. They came from northern Europe, descended from Viking warriors who had settled in what is now northern France. Over generations, they transformed from raiders into skilled soldiers and rulers. By the 11th century, they were pushing south, conquering parts of Italy and eventually crossing into Sicily. What makes the Norman period in Sicily so remarkable is not simply that they conquered the island, but how they chose to rule it. By the time the Normans arrived, Sicily was already deeply layered. Greek Christians had lived there for centuries. Muslim communities were well established from the Arab era. Latin Christians were present, as were Jewish communities with long roots on the island. Multiple languages were spoken daily. Customs overlapped. This was not a blank slate. The Normans understood something crucial. Sicily worked because of its diversity, not in spite of it. Instead of wiping out existing systems, they preserved them. Muslim administrators continued to manage finances and agriculture. Greek remained important in religious and intellectual life. Latin Christianity grew, but it did not erase what came before. Rather than forcing one identity onto the island, the Normans governed over many. This approach turned Norman Sicily into one of the most multicultural societies of the medieval world. At a time when much of Europe was rigid and divided, Sicily functioned as a place of coexistence. Different religions lived side by side. Different legal systems operated together. Knowledge moved across cultural lines. You can still see this blend today, most clearly in architecture. Norman churches in Sicily do not resemble those in Northern Europe. Their foundations are Norman, strong and solid. Their interiors glow with Byzantine mosaics. Their arches, patterns, and decorative details reflect Arab design. These buildings are not symbolic gestures. They are physical evidence of a society that combined influences rather than choosing between them. You could hear this mixture as well. Latin, Greek, Arabic, and local dialects filled the streets. People switched languages depending on trade, worship, or daily life. Markets sold goods from Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Sicily during this period was not isolated. It was connected. For a time, the island sat at the heart of the Mediterranean world. This Norman chapter alone explains why Sicily does not fit neatly into a single European category. It was shaped by people who came from vastly different worlds, yet learned to live together. But this balance did not last forever. After the Normans, Sicily passed through the hands of several powers. The Swabians, a German imperial dynasty, came next. Under them, Sicily became linked to the Holy Roman Empire. One ruler, Frederick II, stands out during this period. He ruled from Sicily and treated it as a cultural center. He spoke multiple languages, maintained relationships with Muslim scholars, and preserved much of the multicultural structure he inherited. Still, power continued to shift. The Swabians were followed by the Angevins, a French dynasty whose rule was harsh and deeply unpopular. Heavy taxation and distant control led to growing resentment. This eventually exploded in the Sicilian Vespers, a violent uprising that forced the French out of the island. After this rebellion, Sicily fell under Aragonese control and later Spanish rule. For centuries, the island was governed from afar. It became part of a vast empire stretching across Europe and into the Americas. Spanish rule left a visible mark. Baroque architecture spread across Sicilian cities. Religious traditions deepened. Family names, customs, and social structures reflected Spanish influence. At the same time, this era often brought hardship. Wealth flowed outward. Sicily became a resource rather than a priority. Yet, even during difficult times, the pattern remained the same. People came, some left, others stayed. Over generations, they blended into the local population. By the time Italy unified in the 19th century, Sicily had already lived many lives. This long, uninterrupted history of movement explains why modern studies often describe Sicily as exceptionally mixed. When people talk about Sicilian DNA today, they are really talking about the accumulated result of thousands of years of settlement, coexistence, and intermarriage. Sicily's genetic makeup reflects Mediterranean reality. Southern European, Greek, Middle Eastern, North African, and Northern European influences appear together, not because of one invasion or one moment, but because Sicily never stopped being connected. Unlike places that experienced brief conquests followed by isolation, Sicily remained open. The sea did not protect it. It welcomed others in. That openness shaped everything. The food tastes different. The music carries different rhythms. The architecture blends styles that do not usually exist together. Even the way people speak and express themselves often feels closer to the wider Mediterranean world than to Northern Europe. This does not make Sicily less Italian. It makes it deeply Sicilian. Identity on the island was never about purity. It was about survival, adaptation, and continuity. People lived together, worked together, married, and raised families across cultural lines long before modern ideas of nationality existed. When modern science observes diversity in Sicily, it is simply confirming what history has always shown. Sicily was never one thing. It was Greek and Roman, Arab and Norman, African and European, Eastern and Western, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish, sometimes all at once. That layered past still lives in the people today, not as separate pieces, but as a single, complex identity shaped slowly over time. So when Sicily is called the most mixed place in Europe, it is not an insult or a curiosity, it is a reflection of reality. By the time the Norman era faded and new rulers took their place, Sicily had already been shaped by centuries of coexistence. Cultures had not simply replaced one another, they had settled in, overlapped, and blended into daily life. What followed would add new layers, but the foundation was already set, and that foundation never disappeared. To understand Sicily today, you don't have to look for traces in textbooks or museums. You can see it in how people live, how they eat, how they speak, and how the island feels. All of this history is not locked in the past. It didn't disappear when empires fell or borders changed. It lives on quietly in everyday Sicilian life. And that is why Sicily still feels different, even to people who can't quite explain why. Sicily does not feel purely European in the way northern Italy does. It feels Mediterranean. The pace of life is slower. Time is treated differently. Meals are long, social, and central to daily life. Food is not rushed, and neither are conversations. This rhythm comes from centuries of living in sea, trade, and shared spaces, where life happened outdoors, and communities depended on one another. The food itself tells part of the story. Sicilian cuisine blends flavors and ingredients that reflect its long history of contact. Citrus fruits, almonds, rice dishes, spices, and sweets carry echoes of the Arab period. Pasta traditions reflect Italian influence, while preparation styles and combinations often feel closer to North Africa or the Eastern Mediterranean than to mainland Europe. Architecture adds another layer. Walk through Sicilian cities and towns, and you see buildings that don't belong to one style or one era. Arab-inspired courtyards sit beside Norman structures. Baroque churches rise above streets shaped centuries earlier. Cities feel layered, not planned all at once, because they weren't. Language also carries the past. The Sicilian dialect sounds different from standard Italian, not just in accent, but in rhythm and vocabulary. Words and expressions reflect centuries of outside influence, absorbed naturally into daily speech. Even social behavior feels distinct. Hospitality is strong. Family ties are central. Public life happens in shared spaces, piazzas, streets, markets. These habits come from a long tradition of coexistence, where communities were mixed and daily life required negotiation, cooperation, and closeness. This is why many Sicilians feel culturally separate from northern Italy, even while being fully Italian. The difference is not political or modern. It is historical. Sicily developed outward, shaped by constant contact with the wider Mediterranean world. The island was never isolated long enough to become inward-looking. The sea connected it to Africa, the Middle East, and Europe at the same time. That openness shaped how people lived, thought, and related to one another. So when Sicily feels different today, it's not imagination. It's history, still breathing quietly beneath the surface, shaping daily life in ways that words alone can't fully capture. Sicily was never shaped by one people or one moment. It was shaped by centuries of contact, coexistence, and change. Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Normans, and others didn't just pass through, they left layers that blended into everyday life. That is why Sicily feels different today. Not less European, just deeply Sicilian. A place where history didn't replace what came before, but built on it. If this story helped you see Sicily in a new way, please like the video, share it with someone who loves history, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.